Alright, so we're going to start the exercises from Yusupov's first chapter, so the 12 from the chapter 1, and then plus the bonus 6 from revision exam, so 18. And we're going to do that for every single one we work through. We'll do the diagrams like we did in the previous video, then we'll do all the exercises all the way through the books. Alright, so this is the first one. It's white to move here, so I'll let you go ahead and pause the video. Alright, so similar to what we saw in the diagrams, we need to look at those checks, captures, threats. First check, there's 3 checks I see. This queen takes here, but I don't see much following after the king just takes our queen. Check here, same thing with just taking our knight. But we also have this check, and after this check, the king must step over. And then we have that, believe it was the Arabian mate, or I'm sorry, not Arabian mate, what was it, Anastasia's mate? You can go double check what it was. The names don't matter that much, just as long as you understand the patterns. And the idea is that the king is cut off here, so we just need something on the file. And we're going to be able to sack the queen and then bring the rook over. So knight check, king here, queen takes, and rook over, and that's checkmate. So easy enough for the first one. Alright, so let's go ahead and set up for the second one. Alright, it's white to move. I'll let you pause the video. Alright, so first thing I would notice here is that if our queen was here instead of the rook, that would be checkmate. Because the king's cut off, we have a nice queen-rook battery. So really, we just need to get rid of this rook. And so looking for checks, captures, threats, we could throw this check in. King must take, right? That's the only option. Checkmate. Pretty easy puzzle there. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one, is white to move. So I'll let you pause the video. Alright, so this one should jump out just right away after having done the Bowden's mate diagrams. Because we can see the king is cut off by this bishop. And if this bishop could come here without this pawn in the way, we'd have checkmate. So we can lure it away with this queen check. And then checkmate. Alright, let's set up number 4. Alright, so I'll let you go ahead and pause the video. Alright, so checks, captures, threats. We always want to look for those active moves. First thing I would notice is the king is very short in squares. Only square that he has that's safe other than the one he's on is this one here, right? This is covered by pawn, obviously this is covered by the knight, blocked in by the other pieces. So he's very limited on squares. And also notice that this is covered by the knight, right? So this is kind of important because, this is similar to some of those other puzzles we looked at. It's not exactly the same, but where the knight and the rook is working together. If we could have a heavy piece right here, like, well, that's a rook or a queen, we can see how that would be checkmate, right? Because the knight's covering the square and it's attacking both safe squares, right? I know that's a little bit of visualization, but we would love for one of these rooks or this queen to be there safely, right? Right now there's a rook in the way. Okay, so that also tells us we only need one heavy piece. So what happens if we take? Check. Ah, there we go, checkmate, right? So sometimes you can see what you want to get to, and then try and backtrack and find a way there. In this case, it's like, okay, we don't need all of our heavy pieces, we only need one, so we don't need the queen. His rook's in the way. What happens if we remove the rook? And then we can find that we can bring the other rook down, check, and checkmate. Alright, so that was number 4. Let's set up number 5. Okay, I've got everything set up. It is black to move here, so I'll let you pause the video. Alright, so this is one of those queen-bishop battery ideas. We can see we already have a queen and a bishop battery, and we're eyeing this square indirectly, right? We're x-raying it through our knight. And although previously we looked at where a knight was covering the square, here it's a queen covering the square instead. But it's the same thing, right? If we could remove that defender from the square while moving our knight out of the way, then it would be checkmate. Alright, so now that we know the idea we need, the question is there anywhere we can move this knight that stops the queen from protecting the square? Well, if you look at all the squares the knight can move to, I know this is very, like, amateurish, just doing it this way, but we can quickly see that there's only one square, this one here, that interrupts the queen from defending the pawn. Now, we don't just stop there, we need to analyze, okay, well, can't the queen take the knight? And then not only are we down a piece, but the queen is protecting the square again. And this is where looking at the whole board and calculating concretely can really help. So we see this as an idea, as a candidate move, but then we're like, what happens if the queen takes? And then we notice we have a bishop here eyeing that square. So now we know that the idea works because one of two things happens. This is with check, conveniently. And if the king just moves, we take the pawn, checkmate, right? If the pawn takes the knight, checkmate, right? We already established the queen's not covering that pawn anyway. So the only thing that I can do is this, and okay, we don't get checkmate, but we just got a queen for 2 pieces. Well, and actually worse than that, because we can't even take the bishop, because it's checkmate. So white actually has to do this, and we get the rook too. And after whichever way they take, yeah, it's pretty ugly, right? We even get this bishop over here, so we just got like a queen for, I guess, 1 piece. Or maybe even no pieces, because we picked up that bishop in the corner. I should have paid attention to what we did here. We get queen, rook, bishop, and they got our bishop and knight, so we got like a queen and a rook for a knight or something like that. Anyway, clearly a huge amount of material, very easily winning. So I think in the game, I'd have to look, but I think in the game they might have even just resigned right away or let them checkmate them. But same thing, idea, you see this, look for ways to interrupt the defense of that. So that was number 5. We're going to move on to number 6. So it's white to move here, and I will let you pause the video. Alright, so this is one of the first things we looked at, made along open lines. So we can see we've got these heavy pieces here, right? The queens and rooks are eyeing these pawns and the king and squares behind it. And this would be a very easy like ladder checkmate if these pawns weren't in the way. The other thing that you should consider is that we only need 2 heavy pieces, right? 1 on this file and 1 on this file. We don't need 3. 2 is enough for that ladder mate. So that should then make you think, okay, how can I move these pawns out of the way, and I have 1 piece I can sacrifice to do that and still have enough for checkmate. Well, I need to leave something on this file so that by process elimination makes me look at this queen sack. And here we can see, okay, well, if they don't take the queen, king moves over, that's checkmate, right? Actually, either way. And if they take, checkmate again, because of that ladder mate. So when you can kind of visualize what you want, then it can help you select the candidate moves and rule out the variations. So here, queen takes pawn, and it's mates either way. Alright, so I'm going to set up position number 7. No bishops, let's do the pawns. No bishops, have a knight though. Rooks, queen, and king. And this is white to move, and I will let you pause the video. Alright, so this one's a little bit different than what we've looked at so far, but it's still based off of the whole premise of a queen-rook battery. So we can see we have a queen-rook battery. This would be a devastating check, actually checkmate, since this is cut off by this rook, if this queen wasn't covering the square. And this is a little bit trickier, but you can also see how if we were to take on this square, like let's say this queen couldn't take us for some reason, and let's say this rook wasn't here, right? It would still be checkmate, except for the fact that the king has this square, right? I know this is a little bit layered, but we don't necessarily need this rook covering this whole rank. The only square we really care about is that one, because the queen's going to cover that one. So that will lead us to, we're looking for checks, captures, threats. All right, so we can see this check doesn't work right away, they're going to take, but we have another check, obviously. Well, okay, we have a couple other checks, but those don't make sense with the queen. We want to keep our queen here. Same thing here, that doesn't make much sense, but we have another check. with this piece that we just established, we don't need too much. And the only answer black has is to take with the queen, which conveniently covers the only other square we were worried about. The king can't go there because his queen's in the way. So check, queen takes, distracted the queen from this square, and that's checkmate. Alright, so that was number 7. Let's move on to number 8. This is white to move, and I will let you pause the video. Alright, so this is another one of those mate along open lines, and the way you can kind of identify this is you're looking for similar themes, right? So when we see like queen bishops lined up, we know it's probably a queen. We're looking for something along queen bishop battery in the position, a queen rook lined up, and so on. And here we see this is an open file for us. This is nearly open if we could get rid of that pawn, and we have all these heavy pieces over here. So similar to what we had a couple ago, if we can get a heavy piece here, a heavy piece here, we could have a ladder checkmate, right? A checkmate with heavy pieces along open lines. And again, we only need 2 heavy pieces to do that. We don't need 3, right? So what I would be looking for is sacking either our queen or rook for this pawn to then deliver checkmate. Well, we can look at rook takes, but after rook takes, they don't have to take us with the bishop and let us take with the queen. They can hide with the king. And then it's a little bit annoying because we can't really take this because they can take back with the queen, right? But okay, let's look at the other way. Take with the queen, and if they don't take us, we have this checkmate, queen takes or rook takes, right? Because the queen covers that square. And if they do, then we get what we want, which is this checkmate. Alright, so then we establish it's queen takes, and then mate, or of course, like I said, if they don't take us and the king goes here, then we'll take there and checkmate. Alright, so that was number 8. I'm going to set up position number 9 now. Alright, so I'll let you pause the video here. It's white to move. Alright, so the first thing I would look for here is that we're very similar to, I think it was the Arabian mate, where we have that knight ideally post, 2 squares in that corner, and a rook, you know, eyeing one of these squares, and that would be checkmate, right? Now here, the rook is covering this square, and this pawn is in the way, and if we move to attack it right away, then black can defend it. So that's a little bit annoying, but we're so close. We're so close. So we want to look for more forcing ideas to try and remove that pawn from the defense of the king. And so that's going to lead us to find this move, knight check, right? And this puzzle is a little bit more complicated. So the easy solution is if black takes the knight, then we get exactly what we want, which is this rook check. King has to step up, and then that's actually checkmate, right? Because the king is cut off, right? Now, if we do have to look at other options, so black doesn't have to take. Black could go here. But the nice thing is we have this, so we're already getting material back, right? We were down in exchange, now we just got that back. The king's in check, so he's got to, if he wants to not just be down more material, you know, down a piece, he's got to take the knight with the king. And I believe the best is actually just taking this pawn with the knight, and that's check. And we have, we're now up material, right? We went from being down material to up material. We have 5 pawns versus 4. Our pawns are also healthier. This is a protected pass pawn. And our pieces are more active, and his king a little bit more exposed. So this should be completely winning for white. I know this is a little bit more trickier than the other one, but we can see how the mate threat forced an exchange, got material, and traded into a winning position. Alright, so that was position number 9, so we're going to move on to number 10. So I'm going to set that up for us. Alright, so this is black to move, and I will let you pause the video. Alright, so this should jump out kind of like, I think it was the Anastasia's mate, but it should jump out to you that we have this whole idea of possibly checking, right? Checking with the knight, moving the king over, and sacrificing with these squares cut off to then deliver like a checkmate, right? Like that whole theme should be kind of already jumping out to you. Now, the problem is though that this check is currently covered by the queen, right? So if the queen wasn't there, we would, we would have that. So the next thing to look at is, do we have a way to distract the queen and or add another knight to this square, right? So we have 2 knights. We really just need one of them here, right? So this is a very difficult problem, but the other thing I guess I would say is if you're familiar with another concept, I know it wasn't in this lesson, but it's called smothered mate. Anytime we check along the square, assume, in this case obviously it can be taken, but, in the other positions where it couldn't be, the king only had one option, right? Now what if the king didn't have that option? Well, then it would be checkmate. It would be like a smothered mate, basically. So that should lead us to this whole idea of knight to g3. The reason it leads us to this idea is twofold. Number one, what we want is we want to put another attacker on this square, right? Because now if we play knight g3, now we have some different variations to calculate, right? But this should be a candidate move. We're threatening one of these knights coming to the square, and then our whole idea of sacking, or even, possibly just this being checkmate right away if the queen moved away somewhere because the king doesn't have this square, right? This should just jump out at you. It's covering this square and it's covering this square, which are two critical squares for the king. Critical squares is a very important concept. And right now, the critical squares are this one, and this one. And the reason these are critical is this square is thematic, where if we remove this pawn, then we have all these checkmate ideas. This one's a checking square, and this is the only flight square for the king. So that's how we can kind of identify these as critical squares near the king. And this one targets two of those critical squares. So that doesn't make it a good move, but it should automatically jump out to us as a candidate move because it's targeting two of those critical squares. All right. Now, the next thing to look at is what happens if we move here, right? Okay, so clearly that hangs our queen. Clearly that hangs this knight, right? So are we accomplishing anything? Well, let's look at queen takes knight. Okay, so if we go here, it also hangs this knight. Sorry, it's hanging all three of these pieces. It's hanging all three. But the nice thing is white can only take one, right? White can only take one. So let's look at what happens when he takes each of them. So knight here, what happens if he takes this knight? We have this nice little fork, right? Remember we were attacking the square again? And that would fork the king and the queen. So we would, yeah, that's just winning, right? So that tells us tactically this knight's defended. Okay, what happens if they take our queen? Well, that was part of the idea of targeting those two critical squares. We don't need the queen now, because what we're going to do is we're going to bring this knight in, and that's checkmate, because the knight's covering the only flight square, right? So tactically the queen is defended because of our checkmate threat, because the queen's overworked protecting against the square. All right, now we also know that this knight's hanging, and we also know that white has to do something about us threatening to bring a knight here, because if he brings a knight in, we have that whole sacrificial idea with checkmate, right? So what happens if he takes our knight this way? Well, if he takes our knight this way, we just take the queen, right? We're attacking their queen just as much as they are. And it's the same thing with this. Like, we can just take the queen, right? So it's just over. Yeah, there's not really anything else to it. I think one variation we can look at is here. Yeah, here I wanted to point out something. So one thing we can look at here is that after this check, I don't want you to jump at taking the queen. I know I mentioned we're forking the queen, so we knew we have at least that. But we do actually have even better, right? So you should always try and look for better. So we can get our whole... We wanted our knight here for that checkmate idea, right? So let's not get tunnel vision on the queen. Checkmate, right? So I know that was a complicated puzzle. Yusupov uses these whole stars. I can give you the stars of the difficulty of the problems, I guess. I'm not sure if... Or maybe I won't, because I'm not sure if like that is considered original content or not, and I'm really not trying to step on anyone's toes. But I will say this is a more difficult problem, but it still has the whole underlying theme of that. I think it was called Anastasia's mate, whatever it was called, this pattern where we have the knight covering these squares, and then a heavy piece checkmate, right? So here, well, the only idea is that, and it's checkmate. All right, so that was a difficult one. Let's move on to number, let's see, which one was that? That was number 10, so we're gonna move on to number 11. Alright, so this is the position. It's white to move, and obviously we can see it's some sort of queen-bishop battery idea since we have this lined up. And I'll let you pause the video. Alright, so again, we can see it's the queen-bishop battery idea, but of course this rook is covering it. But using our whole principle of overworked pieces, we can see that this rook must stay defending this pawn, right? And now that's going to bring us back a step. And if we realize this rook must stay on this position, like it's our move, this rook has to stay here defending this pawn because of checkmate, then what were to happen if we were to trade that rook off? Well, we would just win the rook, right? Because checkmate. So then we can also see that we're almost threatening to trade the rook off, except for the fact that this pawn is here, right? Now that brings us to the second layer, right? So the second layer is this rook is overworked. It can't do anything else. It must do this, right? So it can't be traded off, can't defend anything else. It must do this. Which means that this pawn, in turn, is overworked because it must continue to shield the rook. It cannot do anything else. If it stops shielding the rook gets taken and blacks down material or getting checkmated. Which means since it can't do anything else, this pawn is not defended. Right? It's a domino effect. I think a domino effect is a good way to really put these type of puzzles. This is affecting this, is affecting this, is affecting this, right? So, as weird as it is, this bishop and queen threat makes this pawn undefended. Because this is undefended, we want to see, do we have anything that can take it? Well, yes we do. Oops, not like that. Sorry, board editor. Okay, so we have this knight that can take this pawn. And that's it. Very easy. Pawn can't take because we take the rook, and they can't take back because of checkmate. Best white can do, because we're hitting the rook and the queen, is something like this. And then here, so they at least still cover mate, but we just got a pawn and a rook for a knight, which is a decisive advantage, and white wins. Alright, so that was number 11, so let's move on to number 12. Alright, so this is white to move, and I'll let you pause the video. Alright, so this should jump out to us again as a Bowden's mate theme because we have the two bishops. This one is already cutting off these squares, and this one would easily be able to deliver checkmate if this pawn wasn't here. So that pawn is overworked. You'll notice like almost every tactic comes down to overworked pieces. This pawn is not actually defending this pawn, because it has to guard that square. That's how this works, right? Which means we can just take it. In this case, black doesn't have a choice. He can't even move the king, so he must take, but that allows us to checkmate. So very easy. Rook takes pawn, pawn takes, bishop, checkmate. It's a Bowden's mate. Alright, so that was number 12, which finishes the initial exercises, but of course I have this nice revision exam book that gives us a bonus 6 for every single chapter in the first 3 orange books. So we're going to move on to the first exercise from this one, which I will just call exercise 13. These tend to be more challenging, and we'll see if any of them stump me here. So okay, so I've got the position set up. This is white to move, and I will let you go ahead and pause the video. Alright, so this one it's a more challenging one, so I'm going to actually have to think a little bit myself here. First thing we're looking for is checks, captures, threats. I would notice that this bishop is kind of eyeing this diagonal, especially if this pawn moves out of the way. Our queen's eyeing here. You can also see where, like, potentially, like, if our knight got in somehow, there could be some stuff there. I also am kind of wondering about this open file, right? So I'm looking at all these different ideas. This is the first one I've had to kind of think on, and these revision exam ones are always more challenging. All right, let's think for a moment. All right, so candidate moves to me are knight c4, bishop takes. If there's any kind of threats here, because this could be a threat of some sort, with the pawn coming down. Knight here, though I'm not so sure what happens after he just takes. I don't think this pawn break gets anywhere, but possibly. So these are the type of candidate moves I'm looking at. Knight c4 seems like a threat. I mean, we're hitting this pawn for sure. I also candidate move a rook c1, just trying to get in. But I'll be honest, I'm a little stumped on this one. I knew sooner or later we'd hit a puzzle I'd get stumped on, so that's good. That's part of why I'm doing this. Alright, I'm just going to treat this like I was in a game, right? Since I don't see the idea right away, if I was in a game, what would I play and why? In a game, let's just double check material balance. I've got 6 pawns, black has 6 pawns, a couple bishops and a knight each, rooks, everything looks equal, right? The open file looks strong. Black is threatening my f3 pawn, though. So if I just play something like rook c1, he could just take on f3, and that looks pretty bad for me. So that makes like something like knight c4 jump out to me more. Knight f5, I think he just takes with the knight, and after I take, he just takes with the rook, and I don't see a follow-up. So far I'm looking at knight c4. I also have bishop takes e5. So that sacrifices material. After pawn takes, I'm down 2 points. I could play d6. Which does open up my bishop, does get me a passed pawn. That's definitely a threat. Knight has to go somewhere. Not entirely sure where the knight goes. Like c6 possibly. And that also, so that kind of brings me back to my other candidate move, right? So I was thinking, hey, I'd like to play knight f5, it's a nice square, it blocks out the rooks, my knight becomes very strong. So now suddenly, even if I don't concretely see all the variations, on a very speculative level, bishop takes, pawn push, knight somewhere, right? Maybe here, maybe that looks bad, just the fork right away, right? Possibly here or something. I'm guessing knight here. But anyway, after the knight moves, after the pawn push, then I also have this knight f5 idea. And this knight becomes quite a monster. It's defending this pawn. It's on a nice outpost. I could potentially push this further. I think that alone gives me enough compensation on a very just practical level. So I'm going to say bishop takes, pawn push, knight somewhere. We'll say here for now, but knight somewhere and knight here. All right, so I'm going to check the solution just to see, since I don't know exactly. Oh, okay, so I was wrong. So let's go back. I was on the right idea. I'll say it this way. I was on the right track, but I missed a step. I missed an important active move before. So I was on the right track, but didn't quite get it right. So let's look at that. Let's look at what was correct. Do I have everything back? No, I need to put my knight here, and this was a bishop, and this was not here. Yeah. Okay. So actually what the solution is we play bishop c2 first. This makes a lot of sense, using the queen-bishop battery, threatening this checkmate. And after, I think it was king g8 that they gave, because that's the only way to prevent it without, just giving up material. Now we have bishop takes e5. So it's the same idea as what I had, but it's more potent. So we play this threatening, active, really kind of developing move, putting the bishop on a better diagonal, making a threat, and then we make our idea better. So this is recursive thinking, where you see a good idea, and you go back and you find a better move order. So bishop takes e5, obviously d takes e5, and then here, instead of d6, which is going to be coming, we throw in this check first, king f7, and now d6. And this is really just, this is very bad. So in the game, what was played was rook h8 first. Bishop b3 check. This is the other nice idea with d6, is we have this coming, right? So for example, if this check wasn't, if this attack on our queen wasn't thrown in first, like let's say they just went here, this is pretty bad. We move back to the diagonal now that the queen is over here covering these squares, and they're just gonna have to give up material, and we still have this coming, and yeah. So he moves the rook first to attack our queen and give a flight square to the king, but we still play bishop b3 check. Black played bishop d5 here in the game. And then, even though our queen's hanging, we take the bishop with the knight because we have discoveries, right? And so the rook took the queen. Knight took this rook with check. King took the knight. And then d7, queen d8, and this beautiful rook d6 checkmate. This is gorgeous. Obviously, I didn't see all of that. I just saw some of the themes. Like I said, some of these puzzles in the revision exam are much more advanced. But at least I found some of the right candidate moves and some ideas. So, and I like the idea that we had to use recursive thinking. So if you see a good candidate move, okay, let's look for a better way. And this nice bishop c2 making this threat before we sack the bishop, that was really nice. That game, if you're curious, was Skripchenko versus Fressinet from 2002. Alright, so I'm going to set up the second one from here, so I'll just call this Puzzle 14. And this one is supposedly even harder than the last one, so we'll see how I do with this. Make sure I got everything set up right. Yeah, it looks right. Okay, so this is white to move, and I'll let you pause the video, but I'm going to have to think about it as well. Alright, so you can unpause the video. I mean, obviously you've already done so if you heard me say that, but I am still thinking. And the first thought I kind of have is these mate along open lines idea that we had, but this bishop is in the way. So I guess I still want to kind of look at, alright, so queen takes pawn, king takes, rook check, or do I need, or probably just move the bishop first, right? Because I don't want him to run, right? So queen takes, king here, bishop here. I'm threatening mate in 1. And I honestly don't see how he defends against that, except because he has no way, with his king here, he has no way of getting a heavy piece over, right? The only thing I can see is this bishop sack, with the idea being that he wants to cover that square, right? And of course, if we take here, his king can step up. Alright, so queen check, king here, rook check is not, I'm sorry, we don't want to do, we just want to threaten the rook check. Bishop f1 first, bishop f1. Bishop takes, so we don't have mate immediately. And the candidate moves are rook takes or pawn takes. If we do pawn takes, honestly, if we do pawn takes, I don't see what he does, because this is still a mate in 1 threat. Oh, I do see something though, because the bishop's out of the way, and this pawn's out of the way, so he could take here, pinning the rook to the king. And that could be bad, right? That could be pretty bad. So we don't want to allow that, I don't think. So queen takes, king here, I keep wanting to do that. Rook here, or sorry, bishop here, bishop f1. Bishop takes, so we probably have to take with the rook so that the queen can't take this pawn and pin the rook to the king. King up, so that he can cover this square. And then I think the easiest solution is just bishop to e2, threatening this checkmate again. And I feel like that's the solution, because I don't see how he can get anything over then. I just don't see how he can do it. And then we just have mate in 1. So I think that's the solution. I think it's queen takes, king here, bishop here, bishop takes, rook takes, king up, bishop here, black does something, and then checkmate. I think that's the solution. So I'm going to check. We'll see what it is. Yeah, so queen takes, king takes, bishop f1 is correct, threatening the checkmate. Bishop takes f5, rook takes f5, king h6, and then bishop e2. And then it's just, there's no defense. So that was correct. So supposedly this one was harder than the last one, but I don't think so. I felt like this was much easier than the last one, but that's how it goes. All right, so that was number 14. So let's set up number 15. This looks correct. Okay, so this is number 15 out of 18, so we're getting there. It's white to move. I'll let you pause, but I have to think as well, so. All right, so first things that are kind of jumping out to me are like some sort of knight check here, similar to those Anastasia's mates, I think they were called. I should really go back and double check that we were looking at. And then like some sort of, you know, check here. So for example, this jumps out to me that this knight check, I don't think he can actually really take it without giving up material, right? Because we would just take this rook behind. So this rook is pinned to that rook. So I feel like we can throw this check in, which would force the king here unless he gives up the exchange, of course. And then, yeah, I think this works, right? So because we have 3 heavy pieces and we only need 1, queen takes, knight takes, rook takes, king takes, and then checkmate, right? Which actually makes me think that black does just have to give up the exchange, but if that's the case, then we're quite happy. So I think it's, and this one supposedly as difficult as the one 2 ago, but again, I think this is quite simple unless I'm just missing something. So I think it's just, you know, knight e7 check followed by a double sack on h7 and then mate with our last rook. I'm gonna double check now. So this was number 15. Yeah, knight e7 check. And if king h8, then queen takes, followed by knight takes, rook takes, king takes, and then rook h1 checkmate. So that was correct. So I thought that was pretty easy. We'll move on to number 16 now. Let me set up this position. All right, everything looks right. This is white to move. I'll let you pause the video, but I do have to think for just a moment. All right, so what's kind of jumping out to me is this is some sort of Bowden's mate theme, because we do have this bishop here and we have this bishop eyeing here. And so if this queen can make some sort of threat on these squares, then we might have some sort of Bowden's mate. And what I'm wondering is, so if queen here, I'm not entirely sure. I'm trying to see if black has time to make some sort of escape square, you know, for his king somehow. I'm not sure yet, but this doesn't feel as right as possibly queen here. And the reason why I'm saying this, or maybe even queen here is better. And the reason why I'm saying this is really all we need to do is threaten this pawn, right? We need to take that pawn and then deliver this checkmate. And if we can make 2 threats at the same time, then I don't see how black answers both. So I'm not entirely sure if there's a difference here, but I feel like there is a definite difference here without me even calculating yet, because one of these squares I'm attacking the bishop and that pawn. Now there is a difference here, which just jumped out to me right away. I'm being stupid, because if I go here, the pawn can take, and that's obstructing. Yeah, I mean, like we're not even getting here, right? So this is stupid. That would be a dumb move. All right, so this square versus this square. This one seems much more accurate to me because we're threatening the bishop and to take this, and I don't quite see how black can defend both. Black moves the bishop, we sack, and then we checkmate. Black defends against mate. I think we just win a piece. I'm not entirely sure here. Maybe black has something, maybe black doesn't. Like for example, like something like this, trying to shut down the diagonal. But this feels immediately better. For example, if they do this now, probably just take it. Yeah, this is where you have to put some concrete calculations. So let's say I attack here and they go here. This would be a trade, possibly beneficial to us, but I'm also thinking we can just take, and if they move the bishop away somewhere, like, hey, I'm going to save my bishop, then this is a threat, hitting the knight and that same checkmate threat. So queen c4 here, pawn takes, maybe they take the knight, so that, you know, they're at least getting a piece here. But I still wonder about this, right? Because yeah, we get up a piece, but we're immediately threatening checkmate again. And we're threatening to take this knight with check and get the bishop back. That feels right to me. So I think it's queen c4, pawn here, pawn takes, knight, bishop takes knight, pawn here. If the knight moves, we take the bishop. Bishop moves somewhere. Well, actually, I'm sorry, not if the knight moves. If the knight moves, we just take the pawn and we checkmate, right? Like, there's too many threats. So I'll actually put this on the board now. I hate that. Gosh. All right. So queen c4, pawn push, pawn takes, bishop takes knight, pawn push, because we're renewing our checkmate threat. And we've given up a piece, but we're threatening checkmate and two pieces, and this one with check, and I don't see how black can save all of that. So we have to be better. I think we have to be winning, actually. So let's check the answer now and see what the answer is that's given. Queen c4 is the correct answer. In the game, they actually played a5, and that didn't do anything, so white just won. But e5 can be played to offer some resistance, but after d takes e5, yeah. So after d takes e5, like I said, white is winning. All right, so that one was a little bit trickier because there were some levels to that where black could offer some resistance with e5, but we did get the correct answer, and again, seeing the underlying Bowden's mate ideas led us to it. But I think the other thing is looking for double threats, so like not going here and attacking the bishop at the same time, right? All right, so I'm going to set up position number 17. So we are finally getting there. Okay, I think I got everything set up right. It looks right to me. This is white to move. You can pause, but I'm going to think for just a moment as well. Okay, so the first thing that jumps out to me is that we have some sort of potential queen bishop or queen rook battery here on this open H file, and that, you know, we have extra heavy pieces. We only need 2, we don't need 3 to deliver that checkmate. So for example, bishop takes knight, knight takes knight, rook sack, rook takes knight, king takes, and then rook check, king has to go here, and then I don't know if it matters which square. I'm trying to kind of think about that for a second, but I think one of these queen maneuvers, threatening checkmate on both squares, and I don't see how black gets out of it, because if he tries to push a pawn forward to give himself a flight square, then that seals it in. My only question is if the king moves over, so that after this check he can go there. So that's what makes this a little bit trickier. But I think we have a different way of going about this. So after bishop takes, and this is that recursive thinking again, right? Let's go back and find a better idea. So after bishop takes, knight takes, we don't necessarily have to sack right away. We could just move our queen here, I think is the most accurate move. I don't know if it matters, but I'm covering the pawn. Anyway, queen here, and you know, we haven't sacked anything yet. We've just traded bishop for knight, and we're threatening this knight. And I don't see how the knight can be defended. If the knight moves, it's checkmate, right? So I think that's the answer, is just bishop takes, knight takes, queen here, and if black tries to flee, we just win a piece. And if he doesn't, you know, if he tries to save the knight for some silly reason, then he's getting checkmated. So, not like that, though. Yeah, not like that. We need to... There we go. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's just that we win a piece. Sometimes you don't necessarily have to checkmate your opponent. So let's see. Yeah, bishop takes h7, knight takes, and then queen h2, 3, or 4. Any of them work. Which is what I thought. I wasn't sure that there was any difference. So any of these squares making the battery, and yeah, we're just winning the piece there. So that one was pretty easy. It was a little tricky. We had to not get overzealous with sacrificing and trying to mate, because the king actually could escape, but just stopping ourselves. And this is why you need to calculate before you play things, because in a game I could see someone really just getting super excited, right? So let's set that position back up for a second, because I think this is very instructive for newer players. Put our bishop back here. I think in a game, someone can get very excited and be like, takes, 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 oops, too late, right? And so that's where you got to stop and you got to calculate from the beginning before you make the moves, because sometimes that's not the best approach. So there is a tactic here, but we have to realize that we can't always have it all. We're not going to get checkmate here. Instead, we have to play one of these moves, and then we're going to win a piece, which is good enough that you can convert that and win the game thereafter, but you're not just winning on the spot in this case. Alright, so puzzle 18, we finally have hit the finish line here for the first lesson. Double check. Yep, everything looks right. This is actually a black to move problem. I'm going to think for a second, but you can go ahead and pause the video as well. Alright, so first thing I'm kind of looking at is some sort of, you know, this knight is ideally placed for some sort of like Arabian mate. But we do have a bit of an issue where, like, let's say we sack here, they take, like, we don't have a way to get over right away, right? I'm also a little curious about something weird like that, because we're threatening to sack and take, but I think he can just take it with the king. So that doesn't quite seem right to me. I'd love to make a threat like this, but A, our knight's hanging, and B, like, he can take, and there might even be stuff with checks. So I feel like we need to be looking at very active moves like checks. Although maybe we're okay because we have this flight square. This rook check, I think he just takes. I don't really see a follow-up to that. Queen check is very pretty, but if it works, but after pawn takes, I don't really see the follow-up because we don't have any checks. So I'm wondering if there's some sort of setup threat here. Yeah, so I feel like maybe there's some sort of setup threat, like with like a queen move. I don't quite see it yet, though. Obviously, it's not this. Something like this. So that if he takes, there's this check, which does seem pretty devastating, but he of course doesn't have to take. Also maybe here, same idea. There's this rook move. This rook move looks very dangerous. And I think this might be it, actually. Because, again, we'd like to have this Arabian mate, right? And this threatens queen takes and mate. Threatens it on the spot. And if they take our knight, then we have this and checkmate, right? So it makes a couple different threats. And I'm not entirely sure how because they don't have a way to add a defender to the square. And what's also very annoying is they don't have a way to attack our rook, right? Like that rook is immune there. Like along this, because they'd have to put a heavy piece somewhere here to be able to recapture our rook, and they can't do that. So I think this is rook d2, and I mean it's defended. Like if they want to give us the queen for the rook, I'm pretty happy with that. And I don't see an answer because we're just threatening this right away. Any checks would just bring the king up. So I think it's just rook d2, and the game is pretty much over. I don't see anything, like anywhere. So let's check the answer. Rook d2, and black wins. So got that one right. I feel pretty good. I only messed up the one problem today out of 18, and I was actually pretty close on that one. So I feel pretty good. But some of these were definitely hard. So rook d2, and there's no defense. There's just no defense. So yeah, looking for those underlying themes, like the Arabian mate, like this we'd love to have this mate. So we're just gonna create the threat, and there's no way to stop us from now sacking the queen, right? So, so that concludes lesson 1. We'll move on to lesson 2 next. So thank you for watching. Hopefully you've been studying along on your own. I also very much encourage you to get the books, work through them yourselves along with me. You know, set it up on a board, write down the variations so you're holding yourself accountable, and of course you're also helping support the authors in getting access to their comments and annotations, which are very valuable. All right, thank you much. Have a great day.